When cattle baron O'Reilly, a man despised by most, tried to muscle his way into Brown's Park, the locals wanted nothing to do with him. In this part of the country where outlaws lived freely, rustling cattle was a way of life. It would soon end in murder at the hands of a hired killer. Tom Horn, an ex-Pinkerton detective, was hired by O'Reilly to put an end to the rustling. Horn, frustrated by latter attempts to bring fugitives to justice, only to see them set free days later, decided to come up with his own brand of justice. In a closed-door meeting with several prominent cattle barons, Tom Horn said, "I have a system that never fails. Extermination, turning a blind eye to the judicial system." O'Reilly turned him loose. Tom Horn needed evidence. He needed to know who exactly was rustling cattle in Brown's Park. Knowing his name preceded him, his only chance would be to go under cover. Using an alias of James Hicks, he professed to be a ranch hand looking for work, making his way from ranch to ranch. Soon he was taken in by Matt Rash, a prominent rancher in Brown's Park. Matt Rash was known to rustle cattle. Soon Tom Horn had all the evidence he needed on Matt and an acquaintance of his named Isom Dart. On July 8th, 1900, Matt Rash returned to his cabin on Cold Spring Mountain, never to leave again. He was found 3 days later, lying on his bed with 3 bullet holes in him. An unintelligible note written in blood lay next to him. Hearing of Matt Rash's murder, likely at the hands of Tom Horn, Isom Dart and several other cattle rustlers were on edge. Fearing they were next, they gathered at Isom's cabin on Summit Spring, shortly after daybreak on October 3rd, 1900. They emerged from Isom's cabin, heading for his corrals. 2 shots rang out. Isom, catching both bullets, was dead instantly. The bullet to his head made sure of that. The rest of the party ran back into the cabin, barricading themselves until nightfall when they made their escape. Now, what O'Reilly and Tom Horn hadn't counted on was a tenacious little lady named Ann Bassett. She would bring the fight against the cattle baron and his hired killer right to their doorstep. She would soon be called Queen Ann Bassett. With 2 ranchers murdered, the people of Brown's Park took notice. The blame immediately fell on cattle baron O'Reilly and his hired assassin, Tom Horn. Many of the Brown's Park residents decided to leave, not wanting their grave to be dug next. But not Ann Bassett, now a martyr. She would dedicate the next several years to destroying O'Reilly's 2-bar ranch for the killing of her suitor, Matt Rash, and good friend Isom Dart. Her tactics were harsh, her decisions cunning. Armed with a Winchester rifle and a superior bay gelding named Major, she harassed 2-bar employees every chance she got. But O'Reilly wasn't about to give up. Seeing an opportunity, he purchased her neighbor's ranch. Now the despised cattle baron was in her front yard. A hot-tempered Ann Bassett was not going to take this lightly. Fearing her way of life was at stake, she aimed to take away the one thing the cattle baron loved most, his money. Armed with her horse and Winchester rifle, she drove Haley's cattle out into the desert, where they would be lost and starve. She drove them into the raging Green River, watching them disappear into Lador Canyon. Driving them off cliffs, she made sure Haley's losses were large. Next, she went after the cattle baron's key to success, his ranch manager. 20 years her senior, Ann wooed the manager into marriage, further crippling Haley's ranch operations. Desperate, the shameless cattle baron went to the law. Thinking the law was on his side, the cattle baron filed charges against Ann Bassett for rustling cattle. With little evidence to support his claim, the first trial ended in a hung jury. Meanwhile, word had spread across northwest Colorado. how a young petite lady from a small ranch in Browns Park was being charged by a money-hungry cattle baron for rustling. The stage was set in a packed courtroom on the western plains of Colorado. Ann Bassett stood tall, in front of her accuser. Her lawyer led the cattle baron into admitting he had lied on his taxes. With the people on her side, a now disgraced cattle baron listened as the verdict was read. Not guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted in cheers, giving her the name Queen Ann Bassett. As for the disgraced cattle baron, well, he didn't stick around long. In 1913, Ora Haley sold all his properties in northwest Colorado, retiring to Denver. And Queen Ann Bassett, she remarried and lived to the ripe old age of 78. In her later years, she was quoted as saying, "I did everything they said I did and a hell of a lot more."